The sky was a suffocating blanket of wet heat, and it was screaming. Sister Alara Vance of the Australian Army Nursing Service, ANZ, didn't look up. She didn't need to. She knew the sound. It was the high, angry snarl of a Japanese Zero, a sound that had become as common as the tropical rain. It was followed by the deeper, rhythmic thump-thump-thump of its 20mm cannons walking their way across the airstrip. Mud splattered her white uniform, already stained with sweat and someone else's blood. "Get his legs! Get his legs!" she yelled over the din, her voice raw. She and a young orderly, Private Digger Barnes, were hauling a wounded digger on a canvas stretcher toward the relative safety of the surgical tent. The man on the stretcher was missing his left foot, and he was unconscious, a mercy she couldn't afford. "He's heavy, sister," Digger grunted, his own face a mask of pale fear. "We're all heavy, Digger. Move." The Zero made another pass. The canvas tents of the 25th Australian General Hospital flapped violently, not from the wind, but from the percussion. Dirt kicked up in geysers 20 yards away. Then a new sound tore through the air, a deeper throaty roar, punctuated by the heavy thwack, thwack, thwack of 50 caliber machine guns. "That's one of ours," Digger yelled, a moment of desperate hope in his voice. Ilara looked up, shielding her eyes. A sleek, twin-boomed American P-38 Lightning, silver against the gray clouds, was diving on the Zero. It was a ballet of death. The two planes twisted and climbed, their tracers lacing the sky. But something was wrong with the American. A dark plume of smoke was pouring from his right engine. He was hit. Badly. The P-38 broke off the engagement, the Zero peeling away, its duty done. The American plane was losing altitude, its one good engine screaming in protest. It wasn't going to make the airstrip. It was coming down short. "Oh, Lord," Ilara whispered. The plane disappeared behind the jungle canopy, a quarter-mile past the hospital's perimeter. A moment later, a sickening crunch of tearing metal and splitting trees echoed across the valley, followed by an ominous silence. "Stretcher party," a voice bellowed. Ilara and Digger got their man inside the surgical tent, handing him off to another nurse. The tent was a canvas hell, the smell of ether, unwashed bodies, and the coppery tang of fresh blood. Major Donovan, the chief surgeon, was already working, his face grim. "Sister," he barked, not looking up from a belly wound. "We've got another one. An American. Pilot. They're bringing him in." "Is he?" "He's alive," the major said, his voice flat. "For now." 10 minutes later, 4 men stumbled through the flap, carrying a mangled piece of cockpit debris. Strapped inside was the pilot. His flight suit was shredded and soaked. One leg was trapped, bent at an angle that defied nature. Shards of plexiglass were embedded in his face and chest. They laid him on a cot. Ilara's first glance was purely professional. Massive trauma, compound fractures, probable internal bleeding. His breathing was a shallow, wet rattle. She grabbed a pair of shears and cut away the remnants of his suit to find the source of the bleeding. She saw the dog tags first. Malone, Jack K. She looked at his face. He couldn't have been more than 22. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused, staring at the canvas ceiling. He whispered one word, a sound that was more air than voice. "Damn!" Then his eyes rolled back, and the rattling in his chest stopped. "He's gone," Digger said, already moving to cover his face. Ilara put her fingers to the pilot's neck. She felt nothing. But then, a faint, thready flutter, a tremor. "No," she said, her voice suddenly fierce. "He's not. Get me a plasma kit. Now!" Digger stared. "Sister," the major said. "I don't care what the major said. Get me the plasma." She tore open a sterile packet and grabbed a wide-bore needle. She looked at the young American face, a boy sent from halfway across the world to die in a patch of New Guinea mud. Not today, not on her watch. Headquarters, 25th Australian General Hospital. March 3, 1943, 17 US hours. The 25th Australian General Hospital was not so much a hospital as it was a rumor of sanctuary. It was a cluster of large, sweat-soaked canvas tents pitched on a patch of perpetually sodden ground near the Vital Wow airstrip. It was, by every definition, a soft target. The bigger picture was bleak. The year was 1943, and the New Guinea campaign was the bleeding edge of the Allied war in the Pacific. After the brutal fighting on the Kokoda track, the battle had shifted to the coastal strongholds of Buna, Gona, and the inland airfields. Wau was one of them. This wasn't the war of European fields or desert sands. This was a war of jungle, mountain, and swamp. The enemy wasn't just the tenacious, battle-hardened soldier of the Japanese Empire. The enemy was malaria, dysentery, scrub typhus, and jungle rot. For every soldier brought to the 25th AGH with a bullet or shrapnel wound, 3 more arrived delirious with fever, their bodies skeletal and shaking. The hospital's central problem was its location. It had to be close to the fight to be effective, to get the wounded from the front to the operating table within the golden hour. But its proximity to the Wau airstrip made it an inextricable part of a high-value military target. The Japanese pilots of the 11th Sentai, flying out of Rabaul, were not imprecise. They knew the red crosses painted on the tents were there. They also knew that the airstrip next to them was the throat that supplied the entire Allied position. Strangling that throat meant hitting everything around it. Major Donovan, a man whose surgical brilliance was matched only by his profound exhaustion, had argued with command for weeks. "I am running a butcher shop in the middle of a bullseye," he'd shouted over the crackle of the field telephone to a colonel in Port Moresby. "My nurses are dodging cannon fire to get from the wards to the mess. My patients are being hit in their beds. We need a clear, protected zone. We need air cover." The reply was always the same. "Resources are stretched, Major. The Yanks are doing what they can, but their fighters are needed for bomber escorts. You'll have to make do. Dig in. Dig in." In a swamp. The trenches they dug filled with water in minutes, breeding more mosquitoes. The wards were long tents, each holding 30 cots. The air inside was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, antiseptic, and the sweet, sickly odor of gangrene. Rain hammered the canvas, a constant drumbeat that frayed the nerves. The nurses of the AANs were the spine of the operation. Women like Alara Vance, who had traded starched white aprons in quiet Sydney or Melbourne hospitals for this green hell. They worked 16 20-hour shifts. They managed blood banks with dwindling supplies, sterilized instruments in boiling water over open fires, and most importantly, held the hands of dying boys who were calling for their mothers. The tactical situation was simple. The 25th AGH was essential for morale and manpower. Soldiers fought harder knowing a place like this was behind them, but its vulnerability was reaching a breaking point. Every strafing run, every stray bomb, chipped away at the staff's resolve. They were saving men from the jungle, only to lose them to the sky. Surgical Tent 1, February 27, 1943, 09:14 hours. The failure had been routine, which made it all the more horrific. It happened 4 days before the American pilot fell from the sky. A clear morning, the air unusually cool. The surgical tent was full. Major Donovan was in the middle of a delicate abdominal repair on a young private from the 218th Battalion. Ilara was assisting, her hands moving with practiced speed, anticipating Donovan's every need. Clamp, suture, swab. The rhythmic hiss of the autoclave in the corner was the only sound besides the Major's low, muttered curses and the shallow breathing of the anesthetized patient. The first sound was a distant rising whine. "Get down," Donovan said, his voice quiet, his eyes never leaving the wound. "Major?" Ilara asked. "Down, now." The whine became a roar. A Japanese Dyna reconnaissance plane, fast and light, was coming in low. It wasn't supposed to be an attack run, but the pilot must have seen the cluster of tents as a target of opportunity. The world exploded in a cacophony of thump, thump, thump. The 7.7-meter rounds were light, but they tore through the double-layered canvas as if it were tissue paper. One moment, Ilara was holding a retractor. The next, she was on the floor. The wind knocked out of her. The patient on the table jerked violently. "No, no, no," Donovan whispered. The plane was gone as quickly as it had come. A profound silence filled the tent, broken only by the drip of water from a punctured sterilization drum. Ilara pushed herself up. Her ears were ringing. "Major?" Donovan was still standing over the patient, perfectly still. His green surgical gown was dark with fresh blood. Not his. "He's gone," Donovan said. The voice was hollow, A single round had passed through the canvas roof and struck the patient directly in the chest, killing him instantly, on the operating table, in the one place he was supposed to be safe. The frustration in the hospital metastasized into a quiet, simmering desperation. The nurses grew adept at distinguishing the engine sounds of friendly versus enemy planes. A distant drone would cause every head to lift, every hand to pause, every conversation to stop mid-sentence. "It's the waiting," Ilara confessed to her closest friend, Sister Beth Ryan, as they shared a cup of bitter boiled tea. "It's not the work. It's the waiting for the next one. We save them, Beth. We put them back together with string and hope. And for what? So they can be statistics in their beds?" Beth, a small, resilient woman from Perth, just stared into her cup. "We do the work, Ilara. The rest is out of our hands." "That's not good enough," Ilara whispered, the mud sucking at her boots. "It's just not." The staff was cracking. Orderlies snapped at each other. Donovan became even more withdrawn, a silent, furious engine of surgical work. They were losing the battle, not against the Japanese, but against futility. They were a repair shop in an avalanche. Every attempt to secure their position, every red cross painted larger, every plea up the chain of command had failed. They were alone. Surgical Tent 2, Makeshift ICU, March 3, 1943, 17:30. Hours. Ilara Vance was not an innovator. She was a nurse. In her mind, the two were opposites. An innovator created new things. A nurse preserved what already existed. She was born to it. Growing up in the Queensland outback near Longreach, life was a constant struggle against a hostile environment. She had learned to set a lamb's broken leg using splints from a packing crate. She had helped her mother stitch up a stockman's arm after a fencing accident. She understood, in her bones, that life was a fragile, stubborn thing that clung on if given half a chance. You didn't invent, you persevered. You used what you had. You did not, under any circumstances, give up. This was the mindset she brought to the sodden cot of Lieutenant Jack Sonny Malone. He was, by all medical logic, a lost cause. His dog tags, now clutched in her hand, listed his blood type as O positive. Good. Universal donor. But his injuries were catastrophic. The crash had driven the plane's control stick into his lower abdomen, and his left leg was a ruin of shattered bone and torn muscle. He had already arrested once. "He's tagged expectant," Digger Barnes repeated, standing uselessly beside her. It was the triage tag for those who were beyond saving, who were to be kept comfortable but not expend resources. "He's breathing," Ilara said, her voice low and tight. She was already hanging the first bottle of plasma. "And he's OPOS. We have the plasma." "Sister, the Major needs that for the 3 diggers from the patrol, the ones who can make it." Ilara stopped. She looked at Digger, her eyes, normally warm and compassionate, now as hard as blue steel. "Private Barnes, are you a doctor?" "No, sister." "Are you a nurse?" "No, but..." "Then get me the sulfa powder, another bottle of plasma, and find me Major Donovan's extra suture kit, the fine one, and tell no one." This was the spark. It wasn't a flash of genius. It was a flash of defiance. It was the pragmatic, stubborn refusal of an outback nurse to let a man die just because a tag said he was supposed to. She looked at the boy's face, slack and pale. He was someone's son. He was the one who had tried to save them from the Zero. She saw the ruin of his body not as a tragedy to be mourned, but as a problem to be solved. His blood pressure was non-existent. The bleeding was internal. She couldn't wait for Donovan. "Digger, you're going to be my hands," she said, pulling a sterile sheet over the pilot's lower body. She grabbed a scalpel from a boiling tray. "Sister, you can't." Digger's eyes were wide with terror. That's surgery. You'll be..." "I'll be court-martialed, or he'll die." Ilara snapped, her focus absolute. "He's dying now. The Major is busy. This man has one chance, and it's this tent, this table, and us. Are you in, or are you out?" Digger swallowed, the sound loud in the quiet tent. He nodded. "What do you need, sister?" "Pressure. Right here. Hold it. Don't let go, no matter what." Ilara Vance, driven by a force she couldn't name, gratitude, stubbornness, or perhaps just the ingrained habit of fighting for life, made her first cut. She wasn't building an invention. She was waging a one-woman war against death itself. Surgical Tent 2, March 3, 1943, 1912. Hours Major Donovan pushed through the tent flap, wiping sweat and blood from his forehead with his forearm. He looked like a man who had been to hell and back, which he had. The 3 diggers from the patrol were stabilized, but one had cost him an arm. He was bone-weary, and his patience was non-existent. He stopped dead when he saw the scene. The tent was brightly lit by 2 hissing Tilly lamps. Alara Vance was hunched over the American pilot, her gown soaked, her hands deep inside the man's opened abdomen. Digger Barnes was holding a retractor, his face the color of ash, grimly focused. A stained bucket was on the floor, and the air was thick with the smell of blood and anesthetic. "Sister, Vance." Donovan's voice was a low, dangerous rumble. "What, in God's name, do you think you are doing?" Alara didn't look up. Her hands were moving quickly, deftly. "He had a ruptured mesenteric artery, Major. He was bleeding out. I had to go in." "You had to?" Donovan stalked closer. He stared at the open wound, then at Alara's handiwork. She had, he noted with a detached part of his brain, successfully clamped the bleeder. It was a messy, desperate piece of work, but it was holding. "I gave you an order, sister." That man was tagged expectant. His breathing was shallow, Major. I found a pulse. He wasn't gone. "You used 4 units of plasma." Donovan gestured to the empty glass bottles. 4 units I needed for the post-ops. You've taken Digger from his duties, and you, a nurse, have opened a man up on a cot. This is mutiny." Now Alara looked up. Her eyes met his. There was no fear in them, only exhaustion and a terrible, cold anger. "Then court-martial me, Major. But first I need you to help me fix his femoral artery, or he'll lose the leg. And you're the only one who can." Donovan was stunned into silence. He looked from her defiant face to the pilot on the table. The man's blood pressure, according to the makeshift gauge, was barely registering, but it was there. He was, impossibly, still alive. This was a clash of 2 worlds. Donovan lived by the brutal, necessary logic of triage: save the many, sacrifice the few. It was a general's logic. Alara lived by the nurse's creed: save the one in front of you. "You've compromised this entire hospital, sister," he said, but the fire was gone from his voice. He was just tired. "He's a pilot, Major," Alara said, her voice dropping, becoming persuasive. "He's the one who took on the Zero. He's one of the Yanks who are supposed to be protecting us. If we let him die, if we don't even try, what does that say about us?" Donovan stared at the pilot's young face. He saw the logic. Not the military logic, but the human logic, the one that kept them all sane. He sighed, a ragged exhalation that seemed to drain the last of his energy. "You've already contaminated the field. God knows what kind of infection he'll get." He grabbed a pair of gloves and roughly tied on a fresh mask. "Move over, sister," he grumbled. "You've made your mess. Let's see if we can clean it up. Digger, get me the vascular clamps. And pray, sister, pray you haven't just wasted my time in his life." It was a capitulation. The first step had been taken. The skepticism had been breached, not by an argument, but by an impossible, stubborn fact. The pilot was still alive. Surgical Tent 2, March 34, 1943, 20:05 hours. The prototype was a human life. Building it was a 9-hour ordeal of improvisation, exhaustion, and sheer bloody-minded will. The surgical tent, now their private battleground, became a bubble of intense, focused light in the oppressive jungle night. Outside, the rain started again, a torrential downpour that hammered the canvas, a deafening percussion to their delicate work. "More light," Donovan ordered, his voice already strained. "Digger, hold that lamp closer." "Not that close, you fool. I'm not trying to cook him." The major took over the primary repair, but Alara was his second. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a surgeon's apprentice, a full partner in this desperate gamble. The first setback came an hour in. The pilot, Jack Malone, began to crash. His pressure plummeted. "He's fibrillating," Alara said, her hand on his weak pulse. "Damn it. We've got no way to shock him." Donovan snapped. He was in the middle of suturing the femoral artery, a thread-like vessel that was his only chance of saving the leg. It's the blood loss. He's just empty. We need more blood, Alara said. We have no more O-positive plasma. It's gone. You used it. Alara didn't hesitate. She ripped the sleeve off her own uniform. I'm O-positive, she said. Digger, get the large bore needle and the donor kit. Now. Sister, you can't, Digger protested. You haven't eaten in 10 hours. Don't argue with her, boy, Donovan muttered, his eyes still on his sutures. She's clearly insane. Just do it. For the next 20 minutes, as Donovan worked, Digger drew a unit of blood from Alara's arm and, using a simple gravity feed, transfused it directly into the pilot. Alara never flinched, her other hand busy swabbing the Major's brow. The build was a litany of technical and sensory details. The hiss of the sterilizer, the metallic click of forceps, the sickeningly soft resilience of human tissue, the smell of hot blood, ether, and the damp canvas. They had to improvise. The man's abdomen was a wreck. Donovan, discovering another, smaller perforation in the small bowel, cursed. I need a clamp. No, not that one. Give me the arterial forceps. The ones with the teeth. It'll damage the tissue, but it'll hold. Alara's hands were covered. She irrigated the wound with boiled saline, washing away the mud and fragments of the control stick that were embedded deep inside him. The leg was the worst part. The build here was carpentry, not surgery. The femur was shattered. There's no saving the bone's integrity, Donovan said, assessing the damage. We can set it, but he'll never fly again. Best we can do is stop him from losing it. They use stainless steel wire, normally for wiring jaws, to lash the larger bone fragments together. They packed the wound with sulfa powder, turning the raw flesh a sickly yellow-white. It was brutal, ugly work. Around 03:00, Digger, pale and shaking, fainted. He hit the muddy floor with a soft thud. Leave him, Donovan said. You'll have to be an orderly and a nurse now, sister. They worked on. Alara's back was a column of fire. Her head pounded from the blood loss and the intense concentration. They fell into a rhythm. Suture, cut, swab, clamp. The rain on the roof was their metronome. At 05:17, as the first hint of a sickly gray dawn filtered through the tent flap, Donovan tied off the last suture on the pilot's ravaged leg. He straightened up, his back cracking audibly. He looked at the pilot. The man's chest was rising and falling in a slow, shallow, but regular rhythm. His color was still ghastly, but he was no longer the shade of death. Well, Donovan said, stripping off his gloves. He's not dead. He looked at Alara. She was slumped on a stool, her face buried in her hands, her shoulders shaking silently. Sister, Donovan said, his voice rough, but, for the first time, gentle. Go and get some tea. That's an order. Alara looked up, her face stained with tears, sweat, and the pilot's blood. Is he? He has a chance, the major said. A small one, but it's a chance you built. Now get out of my sight. You too, Barnes, he added, nudging the stirring orderly with his boot. The prototype was built. Jack Malone was alive. Surgical Tent 2, March 4th, 1943, 08:30 hours. The test was not of a machine, but of a man's consciousness. Alara had not slept. She had washed her face, drank a mug of lukewarm, bitter tea, and returned to Tent 2. She sat on a wooden crate beside the pilot's cot, her body a single dull ache. For 3 hours he had been a body, breathing, but inert. The test was whether the man was still inside. The surgery, the blood loss, the shock, any of it could have left him a vegetable. At 08:30, the jungle birds began their morning chorus, a strange, beautiful sound in the middle of the war. Lieutenant Malone's eyelids fluttered. Alara leaned in, her heart suddenly pounding. Lieutenant? Lieutenant Malone, can you hear me? His eyes opened. They were blue and utterly lost. He tried to speak, but only a dry crackle came out. Here, she said, dipping a gauze pad in a cup of clean water and touching it to his lips. Easy. He winced, his entire body tensing in a wave of pain. Don't move, he gasped. Feels Feels like I got hit by a train. Worse, Ilara said, a small, shaky smile touching her lips. You were hit by New Guinea, and then by me and Major Donovan. He tried to focus on her. He saw the worn-out face, the kind eyes, the Australian slouch hat she'd pinned her nurse's veil to. You're Aussie, he whispered. Australian, Sister Ilara Vance. You're at the 25th General Hospital. He processed this for a long moment. He tried to look down at his body, but Ilara gently put a hand on his shoulder. Don't. You're in one piece. Mostly. You were very badly injured. My plane. It's gone, son. But you're not. The test was coming. Was he coherent? Did he understand? The zero, he mumbled. Did I? You drove him off. He strafed us, but you drove him off. You saved us a lot of trouble. A flicker of pride, even in his ruined state. Good, good. He closed his eyes, and Ilara thought he was drifting off. But then he spoke again, his voice clearer, a new urgency in it. My squadron, the 49th. They'll be looking for me. They know you're here. Ilara lied, just to soothe him. No, they don't. They'll just write me off. He was getting agitated, his breathing quickening. Gotta tell them. Gotta... Shh, easy, Ilara said. There's an evacuation flight, a C-47, coming in at 1100. It's taking the worst cases to Port Moresby. You'll be on it. You can tell them yourself. He visibly relaxed. His eyes found hers again, and this time, they were sharp. He understood what she wasn't saying. He understood the effort that had been spent on him. Why? He whispered. A simple, direct question. Pardon? Why, me. I was done. Ilara wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. You were a bit of a mess, that's true. But we don't like to give up around here. It's bad for morale. He held her gaze. He saw the lie and the deeper truth beneath it. Ilara, he said, testing the name. Sister Ilara, 25th AGH. That's right. Tell Major Donovan. Thanks. He gripped her hand, his fingers surprisingly strong. And you're an angel, a real, tough, Aussie angel. He was coherent. He was grateful. He was alive. The prototype was a success. The first test was passed. Wow Airstrip, March 4th, 1943, 11 hours. The evacuation was a blur of frantic, careful motion. A battle-scarred C-47 Dakota landed on the muddy airstrip, its engines never shutting down, its propellers beating the wet air. Move! 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 The transport sergeant bellowed. Ilara and Digger helped carry Jack Malone's stretcher. Every jolt sent a fresh wave of agony across his face, but he bore it with a pilot's stoic silence. They slid him into the dark, cavernous fuselage, where a dozen other wounded men lay in tiered bunks. You'll be in Moresby in an hour, Ilara shouted over the roar of the engines. He grabbed her hand again, his eyes locking on hers. Listen to me, he said, his voice intense. The Japs, they're running a new schedule. They hit us at 14:30 yesterday. They'll be back. Same time. They always run a pattern. How do you know? We've been charting them. Tell your CO, 14:30. They'll come for the strip. And you. I will, Ilara promised, just to calm him. You just get safe, Lieutenant. Jack, he said. Call me Jack. Get safe, Jack. She stepped back, and the heavy doors were hauled shut. The C-47, heavy with its cargo of broken men, lumbered down the strip and clawed its way into the sky. Ilara stood in the prop wash, watching it go. She felt a profound, hollow emptiness. She had poured everything she had into that man, and now he was gone. She passed his warning on to Major Donovan, who grunted and passed it on to the infantry captain in charge of the airstrip's anti-aircraft defenses. The captain, holding a few meager 40mm Bofors guns, just nodded. We're always ready, sister, but a schedule? He clearly didn't believe it. The day dragged on. The heat became oppressive. The hospital was thick with the flies and the groans of the wounded. 14s came. Then 14:15. Ilara found herself outside the mess tent, wiping down tables, her ears straining. She was scrubbing a table when she heard it. It wasn't the distant, high whine of a single fighter. It was a low, heavy drone, a rumble that you felt in your chest before you heard with your ears. Digger Barnes looked up from his work, his face white. "Sister?" Alara scanned the sky to the north, and she saw them. Not one, but a formation. 9 of them. Twin-engined, Mitsubishi G4M Betty bombers. And above them, a weaving, dancing screen of at least a dozen Zeros. "Oh God," Digger whispered. "They're not just strafing, they're going to bomb us." The air raid siren, a pathetic, hand-cranked thing, began to wail. "To the slit trenches!" Alara screamed, shoving Digger toward the nearest dugout. "Everyone to the trenches!" Nurses and walking wounded scattered like ants. Alara grabbed the arm of a man on crutches, half dragging him as he stumbled. The Bofors guns opened up, their thump, thump, thump sounding like pebbles against the sky. The first string of bombs detached from the lead plane, falling in a graceful, silent arc. They were aimed directly at the airstrip and the hospital. Alara threw herself into the watery, muddy trench, landing on top of Digger. She covered her head, her body trembling. This was it. This was the failure. The bombers were too many, the Zeros too strong. Jack Malone's warning had been right. The whistle of the falling bombs became a deafening shriek. This was the real trial, and they were about to fail. The skies above Wau, March 4th, 1943, 14:31. Hours in that last agonizing second before impact, a new sound split the sky. It was not the roar of the Bettys or the snarl of the Zeros. It was a sound of pure, concentrated fury. It was the high-pitched, screaming whine of engines at full power, a sound that Alara had heard only once before. "Lightnings!" Digger screamed from beneath her, his voice muffled by the mud. "It's the Yanks!" From high above, diving straight out of the sun, a perfect textbook ambush, came 16 P-38 Lightnings. They fell on the Japanese formation like silver hawks on a flock of pigeons. The sky, which seconds before had been orderly, erupted into a chaotic three-dimensional melee. The P-38s didn't go for the Zeros, they went for the bombers. Their combined firepower, 4 50 caliber guns and a 20mm cannon in the nose of each plane, was devastating. The lead Betty bomber simply disintegrated. One moment it was there, the next it was a ball of orange fire and black smoke. The dominoes began to fall. A second bomber, its wings sheared off, tumbled end over end, its bomb load exploding in a sympathetic detonation that rocked the ground. The Japanese bombs, released wildly in the panic, fell wide. They stitched a line of massive explosions across the empty swamp a half-mile away, sending up pillars of mud and water. Now the Zeros, their charges scattered, dove in to protect them. The dogfight began in earnest. The air was filled with the hammering of machine guns, the thump of cannons, and the high G whine of engines. Alara and the others, crouching in the trenches, watched in stunned silence. This was not a random patrol. This was a rescue. One P-38, its silver fuselage emblazoned with a leaping kangaroo insignia, tore after a fleeing Zero. The Zero twisted, but the Lightning, faster and more heavily armed, stayed on its tail. A stream of tracers, like red-hot needles, stitched across the Zero's fuselage. It belched smoke and plunged into the jungle. The Japanese formation was broken. The surviving bombers, smoke pouring from 2 of them, jettisoned the rest of their bombs and turned tail, heading for the safety of Rabaul. The Zeros, outmatched and outnumbered, followed, chased by the victorious Americans. The sky was empty again, save for the pillars of smoke and the fading sound of the P-38 engines. The hospital staff, covered in mud, crawled out of their trenches. They were stunned, soaked, but completely untouched. Then they heard one plane returning. It was a single P-38. It came in low, sweeping across the airstrip at less than 200 feet. It flew directly over the hospital, its twin booms casting a fleeting shadow over the Red Cross tents. As it passed over the surgical tent, the pilot rocked his wings. A slow, deliberate hello from one world to another. Alara Vance stood in the mud, her hand to her mouth, tears streaming down her face, mixing with the dirt. She raised a trembling hand and waved back. Major Donovan stood beside her, his helmet askew. He watched the P-38 climb into the clouds and disappear. "Well, I'll be damned," he muttered. The expectant pilot. The recognition was complete. The domino effect had been Jack Malone, strapped to a stretcher in a C-47, using a radio to contact his base in Moresby. He had passed on the warning. His squadron, the 49th Fighter Group, had scrambled everything they had. They hadn't just been on a routine patrol, they had come for the 25th. Wow Valley, March 5th, March 15th, 1943. The event of March 4th changed everything. The innovation, Alara's defiant act of saving one pilot, had been modified by the 49th Fighter Group into a new, unofficial tactical doctrine. The pilots of the 49th, a cocky, tight-knit group of men, now had a personal stake in the war on the ground. The 25th AGH wasn't just a hospital, it was their hospital. It was the place where Sonny Malone had been pulled back from the dead by a tough Aussie angel. The field modification was simple. The 25th AGH became the rally point. Pilots flying back from missions, low on fuel or ammunition, would make a flyby of the hospital. It became a known checkpoint. More importantly, the squadron commander, a hard-nosed major named Tex Hill, informally assigned a high-altitude combat air patrol, CAP, to the Wow Valley. The pilots called it Angel's Perch. "You don't mess with the 25th," became an unofficial motto in the 49th's briefing room in Port Moresby. Sister Alara's place is off limits. The effect on the hospital was immediate and profound. The distant drone of an engine no longer caused panic. The nurses and staff could hear the difference. The P-38s had a deep, resonant thrum. The Zeros had a high, thin whine. The sound of the lightnings became a comforting, constant presence. But the enemy was not stupid. The Japanese ground commander, Colonel Yokoyama, was intensely frustrated. His air support, vital for softening up the Australian defenses around Wow, was being systematically intercepted and destroyed. His reconnaissance planes reported a constant American fighter presence over the very valley he needed to attack. He saw the hospital, not as a medical facility, but as the reason for the air cover. It was the anchor. The Americans were protecting it. Therefore, the hospital must be removed. If the sky was denied to him, he would use the earth. The enemy countermeasure came on the night of March 14th. The rain was a deluge, turning the ground into a river of mud and providing perfect cover. A small, elite unit of Japanese jungle troops, skilled in silent infiltration, bypassed the Australian infantry pickets. Their target, the cluster of tents with the red crosses. The first sign of the attack was not a gunshot, but a scream. A sentry at the hospital's small defensive perimeter was silenced. Alara was in the post-op tent, checking on a young corporal with a fever. She heard the single muffled cry, and her blood ran cold. It was a sound that didn't belong to the hospital. Then, the night exploded. A Japanese light mortar, a knee mortar, lofted a shell that landed directly on the mess tent, blowing it apart in a spray of canvas and splintered wood. Machine gun fire erupted from the jungle perimeter, tracers cutting through the darkness. The ground attack had begun. Perimeter, 2 to 5th AGH, March 14th, 1943, 23:40 hours. The hospital's defense platoon, a handful of convalescing diggers, orderlies, and cooks, returned fire. It was a desperate close-quarters fight in the mud and darkness. "They're inside the wire," a voice screamed. "To the wards! Protect the wards!" Major Donovan, a Webley revolver in his hand, stood at the flap of the surgical tent. "Sister, get the walking wounded into the main trench, now!" Alara ran, slipping and falling in the mud, shouting for patients to get under their cots. The hospital had become a war zone. The Angel's Perch was a blessing from the sky, but it was useless at night, useless against this kind of infantry assault. The protection had made them a target. Digger Barnes, the young orderly, was helping move a patient when a Japanese soldier appeared from the shadows between two tents. Digger shoved the patient to the ground and charged the soldier, armed with nothing but his own fear and courage. Alara saw it happen. The flash of a bayonet. Digger fell, his hands clutching his stomach, a low gasp escaping his lips. A digger from the defense platoon shot the Japanese soldier, but it was too late. Alara scrambled to Digger's side. "No!" "Digger, no." He looked up at her. his eyes wide with shock, the rain washing the mud from his face. "Sister," he coughed, and blood came to his lips. It hurts. We'll get you inside," she sobbed, trying to put pressure on the grievous wound. "It's okay, sister," he whispered. "You taught me not to give up." He died in her arms, in the mud, as the battle raged around them. The fight was short and brutal. The attackers were repulsed, leaving a dozen of their own dead in the mud, but the cost was high. Digger Barnes and 2 men from the defense platoon were lost. Alara was shattered. She sat in the ruined mess tent, cradling Digger's dog tags, unable to process the night's horror. "This is my fault," she whispered to Donovan, who was sitting opposite her, his face black with cordite and despair. I saved that pilot, and it brought this." Donovan looked at her, his eyes hollow. "Don't," he said, his voice flat. "Don't you dare." He leaned forward. "This is a war, sister. They were always going to hit us. We were a soft target, and they hit us. Then you did what you did. You saved Malone, and the 49th made us a hard target. So the enemy changed tactics. They probed, and they found us hard on the ground too." He gestured to the dead Japanese soldiers being carried away. "They lost more than we did. They won't try that again. Not in a hurry. But Digger is a casualty of war," Donovan said, his voice breaking for a second. "Just like the man on your table 4 days ago. The difference, sister, is that now we have a fighting chance. Now, we're not alone." The moral consequence was a terrible, heavy burden. Their protection had come at a price. The next day, a P-38 from the Angel's Perch Patrol was hit by a lucky shot from a Japanese AA gun miles away. The pilot bailed out, was found by an Australian patrol, and brought to the 2/5 with a broken leg. Alara Vance found herself treating the very man who had been shot down while protecting her. The cycle was complete. It was a closed, brutal loop of sacrifice and reciprocity. She was no longer just a nurse. She was a link in a chain, a vital part of a battlefield economy where the currency was blood, skill, and gratitude. Wow Valley, April-May 1943. The Japanese ground attack on the 2/5 AGH was the high-water mark of their offensive in the Wow Valley. The failed probe, combined with the impenetrable air cover provided by the 49th Fighter Group, convinced Japanese command that the position was too costly to take. The strategic initiative shifted. The hospital, once a symbol of vulnerability, had become an anchor. Its immediate legacy was profound. The 2/5 AGH, now secure under its Angel's Perch, became the primary casualty clearing station for the entire sector. Its survival and new, hardened status allowed Allied command to push forward with their own offensive, culminating in the landings at Leh and the eventual capture of the Huon Peninsula. The simple fact that wounded soldiers could be brought to a secure, effective hospital just behind the lines was a massive boon to morale. The Diggers of the 3rd Division fought with the knowledge that if they fell, Sister Alara Vance and her team were waiting for them, protected by the Kangaroo P-38s. The story of the 2/5 and the 49th spread, not through official reports, but through pilot chatter and soldiers' letters. It became a small, powerful legend. The Pact of the 2/5. Major Donovan, recognizing the shift, put Alara in for a commendation. He couldn't write the truth. He couldn't say, "She performed an unauthorized life-saving surgery on an American pilot," which directly resulted in the creation of an unofficial, permanent combat air patrol for this facility. Instead, he wrote, "For conspicuous bravery and devotion to duty, Sister Vance has worked tirelessly under enemy fire, demonstrating medical skill and courage far beyond the expectations of her station. Her steady hand and indomitable spirit have been an inspiration to this entire unit." She was mentioned in dispatches, a small formal acknowledgement of an immense unrecorded contribution. The strategic impact was undeniable. The hospital held, the airstrip held, the flow of supplies and reinforcements continued, and the Japanese advance in New Guinea was, in this small but vital sector, stopped cold. When the 2/5 AGH finally packed up months later to follow the advancing front, the last tent was struck under the watchful, circling presence of 2 P-38 Lightnings, wagging their wings in a final, silent salute. Austin, Texas, May 12, 1968. The ranch house was low and modern, a world away from the mud and canvas of WOW. Ilara Vance, now Matron Vance of a large Sydney hospital, walked onto the patio. She was in her 50s, her hair graying, but her eyes were the same, clear, direct, and kind. A man in a wheelchair rolled himself out to meet her. He was missing his left leg below the knee, but his smile was bright. "Sister Ilara," Jack Sonny Malone said, his voice thick with a Texas drawl and 25 years of memory. "Mr. Malone," she replied, smiling. "It's good to see you on your feet," so to speak. They sat for hours, talking. He had made a full recovery but lost the leg to infection in Port Moresby. He'd been medically discharged, gone home, and built a successful aviation parts company. He was married, with 3 children. "I tried to find you after the war," he said, staring at the setting sun. "But everything was such a mess. All I knew was, Sister Ilara." "It's a common name," she said softly. "Not to me." He turned to her, his eyes serious. "I want you to know what you did. It wasn't just for me. The boys, the 49th, they needed that. We were just machines up there. Points in the sky. You made it human. You gave us a place to protect, a reason." He rolled his wheelchair to his study. On the wall, among photos of his family, was a large framed photograph. It was a P-38 Lightning in flight. On its nose cone, painted in elegant script, was the name Sister Ilara. "She was my second plane," Jack said. "Flew her till 45. She always brought me home." Ilara touched the glass, her fingers tracing the name. Archival footage, a historian 2010s. The official histories of the New Guinea campaign are all about grand strategy. They mention the battles of Kokoda, Buna, and Ley. They talk about MacArthur's island hopping. But the archives are silent on these small human pacts. The Pact of the 2/5 never existed in an order of battle. You won't find a memo from a general authorizing a permanent air patrol over a single field hospital. It was a decision made, not by high command, but by a handful of pilots in a briefing room in Port Moresby, fueled by the loyalty they felt for one of their own and the gratitude they felt for an unknown Australian nurse. History is not just written by generals. It is built day by day by individual acts of courage, of defiance, of compassion. In the middle of the jungle's hell, Sister Ilara Vance refused to let a man die. And in return, a squadron of fighter pilots gave her a gift. They gave her the sky,